All right. Thank you so much for listening into today's episode. Today I have another guest with me, and today's Moshe, who is a law, not law, lawyer, and he works with profit in particular. But welcome, Moshe, and I would love for you to just give us a brief introduction.
Well, hi, Ken. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast. But I need to retract your statement. I'm not a lawyer. I
Oh,
work with lawyers.
you
My
work with lawyers.
background is in accounting,
There you go.
and so I started an accounting firm, and through a couple of detours, ended up working directly with law firms, and realized that there was a need in that specific market where there was a lot of my clients had beautiful firms. I mean, you walked in the door and they had the signage, they had the receptionist up front with a big smile on her face, and they had staff, and they had people coming in and signing up and working cases through them. But behind the scenes, their finances were in shambles. They were literally moving
Mm,
personal funds in to cover payroll, cover rent. And when I had, four of these clients out of five law firm clients that I had at the time, I realized, you know, there's something's broken in the system, right? It's not they can't all be I don't what's the wording, like, dumb when it comes to business. But the reality, I mean, these are well educated, smart people, right? But the reality is
absolutely.
is that business doesn't come naturally to everybody.
Yeah.
And what I found is that they don't understand the business equation, and they really need help with navigating that and projecting profitability, and being purposeful with the actions that they're taking. And it's really like that in any industry where somebody knows, oh, I need to get clients, I need to charge clients, and I also need to build my team and build my systems and my software and all that. But if you don't have a cohesive plan of how is this all going to come together into a profitable formula, then ultimately you end up doing all the things, but you have nothing to show for it.
Hmm. Well, let me just first apologize for calling you a lawyer. But I don't know. For some reason, I always thought you were a lawyer. I don't know why. But, there we go. But thank you
I
for
give
correcting
I
me.
give I give off that sense, right? Like, uh, but it's accountants and lawyers are very similar, right? We're both
Yeah.
helping clients within the confines of a legal framework. So
Hmm.
it is very common for me to get that mistaken identity, especially since my brand is profit with law. So people
Hmm.
automatically assume. What's interesting is that the fact that I'm not a lawyer is one of my differentiating factors that I lead into the market with. There's so many coaches out there that help law firm owners with their growth that are
Hmm.
attorneys who have achieved a certain level of success, and they say, well, if I achieve this level of success, then um, then um, I can help you do the same. And
Hmm.
what I tell the market is, look, what worked for that one doesn't necessarily work for you. And what I do
Exactly.
is I help you with understanding how business operates and getting good habits around business operations, planning, being very purposeful with what you're doing. And by doing that and executing on that plan, you're setting yourself up for success. So it's really, one of the things I hang my hat on is the fact that I'm not a lawyer, and that's why you
Hmm.
should listen to me as opposed to perhaps other voices in the arena.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you said that, what worked for that person doesn't necessarily mean that it works for another law firm or another lawyer, because that goes into any kind of business that you're doing. I mean, that's what we're seeing out in the online industry today is that people look up to these experts and they think, oh, they did this. I just need to copy that and, I'll have the same success. But obviously, it's not like that at all. And you're the proof of that.
Yeah, the online industry is a very interesting example to use because the online business model is it's so centered around the marketing itself. Like, how you sell and position your product up front is how you make a successful online business.
Mhm.
That it's almost you can if you're successful, you almost can't outspend the revenue coming in. right? Because you're selling a widget that doesn't require more effort the more times that you sell it, unless
Mm-hmm.
you're a coach and they're getting your time. But if you're selling a course or a membership or something like that, there's very little incremental cost to handle more clients.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very interesting business model where uniquely, um, the name of the game is being able to get your messaging right, have the right launch, be able to attract your crowd the right way, and that's why you find most of the coaches out there that are teaching people how to build that kind of business are people who have done it before, because
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what you need in that business. In most other traditional businesses, it's not the case. You're not going to get this meteoric success rise by selling more of what you have exclusively. If you have a
Yeah.
landscaping business, the moment you get more clients than one truck can serve, you need to buy another truck and hire another crew. And
Exactly.
and the same
And
thing
that's
in
gonna
law,
take up a
right?
chunk of your money. So.
Right. And the same thing in law, right? The moment that
Mm-hmm.
one attorney is full, they can't take not one more case until you
Yeah.
hire another attorney. So uh, your inventory is something that the expense grows as the business grows. So it's a really interesting phenomenon, because initially when I started my accounting practice, I first targeted online businesses. I had been listening to Pat Flynn and John Lee Dumas and
Mm-hmm.
um, Amy Porterfield and Michael Hyatt back in the day when I was a podcast listener back in the day when you had to download the podcast episodes into the iTunes software and then sync it with your iPod in order to listen to it. And those were the people I was listening to. So I kind of like I was like, I really know this crowd. Like I understand their business, and I want to go out and serve them. And what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is that it's so much of what I just portrayed that there were only two camps of clients. There were either the people who haven't made it yet and
Mm-hmm.
therefore are struggling, can't afford to hire an accountant, and not my ideal clientele,
Mm-hmm.
or they already achieved success. That moment in between building the business, figuring it out, and plowing through and being unsuccessful to the moment of success where all of a sudden you're a multi-million-dollar business, that is such a rapid leap and jump that it usually happens within 1 year and
Mm-hmm.
maybe 2 years. And people are left scrambling at the end of the year with, oh my gosh, I had this amazing year and now I've got to do my taxes, and I can't go to TurboTax. I need to actually hire a professional. And what are they doing? They're going to somebody else in their network who's already achieved that level of success and saying, hey, do you have a recommendation for me? So
Mm-hmm.
if unless you get your foot in the door and get known um, to that specific arena of people, it's almost impossible to pick up those clients. I was only successful in finding one client that I got right while she was on her meteoric rise. So when she engaged me, she was just starting to achieve success, and we went
Mm-hmm.
and I was with her as she went from struggling to I have more money than God, right? Um,
Right.
and so it's a very interesting phenomenon, and it didn't last very long. I was serving that market from 2017 to 2019, when I decided to make that pivot and to serve law firm owners. And you and I are in the same coaching organization, and James Wedmore is my business coach. And it was on a coaching call or in a hot seat at one of his events that I shared that I had gotten these clients, and I didn't know if this was like my ideal client was the person that I was supposed to work with. And
Mm-hmm.
there was an in-person event that we did, and there was a person he brought in, Emily Aarons. Emily Aarons does visualization exercises or visualization meditation with her clients, and she specifically serves the online community. um, and she is a genius at what she does. Now, I was this, accountant guy, never meditated in my life, and here comes this lady who's telling us to close our eyes, take a deep breath, starts taking us through this visualization exercise, and I almost didn't play along with it. I almost was like so resistant to it that I didn't do
Mm-hmm.
it. But I decided, hey, I'm here. Let me just follow. Let me just do. And and she took us through this visualization that she calls what was the terminology for it? Uh, it was your ideal client, but she had a much better terminology for it. Uh,
Right.
you it when a couple gets together and they're like the perfect match, what do we call it? I'm asking you
No.
because you're gonna help me remember.
Perfect match. No, I'm not sure.
It'll come to me. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
I will remember,
No
and I will
worries.
go back to it, and I will tell you guys what it was called. But anyway, I went through this visualization exercise, and what was crazy is that I thought that my ideal client was uh, was a guy, was somebody in the online industry, and came into this field, and I sat down, and I was having a beer, and this person joined me and started talking to me, and we talking about her business, and it was a female, and she was an attorney, and it
Hmm.
was in that moment, or at the end of that exercise, that I realized that, and I don't know how visualizations work, and is it divine intervention, is it what your brain has
Hmm.
already decided and you just haven't accessed it, um, but it was in
Yeah.
that moment that I decided to go all in on law firms and to be myself, because so much of the legal space is very masculine and very like
Hmm.
competitive, and that's not my personality, which was part of why I was resistant to join the space. And I came into the space as this loving dad who's prioritizing his family over his business, and I'm going to tell lawyers how to be successful. And I started my podcast in March of 2019, and we've over 300,000 downloads. We've released over 300 episodes, um, and
Wow.
and just stuck with it, and it really it developed into more. The brand kicked off of the podcast. So
Hmm.
much of what I did after that was because of the connections I made through podcast interviews and things like that. In December of 2019, I hosted a online conference, the Law Firm Growth Summit, and that came about through multiple conversations with people who I had interviewed on the podcast, where I found out that in the legal industry, um, the way that lawyers gain their knowledge is by going to conferences. The problem is that all these
Yeah.
conferences are about the legal side of it, and there's
Yep.
a class thrown in here, a talk thrown in there that has to do with business development. But
Hmm.
there really wasn't a conference, except for, I mean, there are conferences hosted by software companies. Like Clio is the big practice management software company in the legal industry. They have a conference called ClioCon, and that's more
Hmm.
directed towards the the success of the business and the systems and processes and how you're implementing technology. Um, but really, there wasn't a agnostic conference out there that's specifically about business growth. And the other thing that really bothered me was that if somebody can't separate themselves from their office to attend a conference, they can't get on a plane because they've got young kids, because they've got a spouse who won't put up with that. They're
Hmm.
out of luck. So what I decided was I'm going to host a virtual conference. It's going to be exclusively on business growth, and
Right.
I'm going to bring in everybody that I can find that's in this industry, talking to these people, and just bring all these experts together. We had over
Hmm.
35 speakers at our first event in December of 2019, and we
Wow.
registered over 2,300 law firm owners to that event.
That's awesome.
And it was really what catapulted my coaching business. And I thought I was growing an accounting practice, and then I ran this
Yeah.
event,
Exactly.
and then people wanted to know what's next, and then COVID happened, and when COVID started, people were left scrambling trying to figure out what are they going to do. So I started a
Hmm.
membership, really inexpensive. I started at $27 a month, ultimately ended up going up to $97 a month, and then I ended up shutting it down. But it was born out of having this tribe that I
Hmm.
now, I had a voice into, and I had an ear to hear them. And I was listening to the confusion and not knowing what's next. And I wanted to create a place where they can be supported. Um, and the group coaching program that I run came out of yet another, what, and this is really making the case for you got to have a coach, right? And I
Mhm.
know that there are people listening to this podcast who you're a coach, right? But you have to have a coach that you go to. You have to have
Absolutely.
somebody's world that you're in to really help you work through these things, because it was right in front of me and I didn't see it. I couldn't, I was trying to do these one-on-one coaching arrangements, which is not scalable. And
Yep.
I went to a mastermind in Sedona, Arizona with James Wedmore, and I sat in this hot seat, and really I thought I was asking a question about pricing my services, right? I was asking,
Mhm.
I wanted to know, am I not getting people because I'm charging too much?
Right.
And it was one of the best hot seats I've ever received. And in that conversation, really what we determined, what he helped me see was that I needed to play around with a group coaching program, and that group coaching program is my business today. It's just incredible. And
Just from a question about pricing.
right, exactly. And we went to, I started it at 5,800, and I still was so uncomfortable with that I discounted it. Right, I gave people a
Mhm.
fast acting discount if they made a decision
Yep.
right away. And so my first group of people were coming in were for $4,500 for a 90-day program, and then I was offering for them to continue after that. Today I
Mhm.
charge $21,000, and I don't offer the 90-day anymore. It's 12 months,
Wow.
and
Awesome.
and you can do the math. I mean, you can have a largely successful business with, 10 to 20 clients. And then when you get
Mhm.
beyond that, now you have the money to uh, bring on additional coaches, have in-person events, which is really what we're doing now. It's the next phase of growth. And we have our next summit coming up. I don't know when this is going to air, but if there's any attorneys listening, or go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. Our next event is December 5th to 7th, and if you missed it, just go and buy the recordings because it's well worth it. And we're going to have, once again, 30 plus experts on stage, but the caliber of expert gets better every time because I have a
Mhm.
larger network. I have a track record. There are people who want to get on our stage. Last year we had Mike Michalowicz as one of our keynote speakers. He's, a well-known business book author. His book Profit First is over my right shoulder here. If we want to get into a profit first conversation at some time in this interview, we certainly can. I am a profit first professional. It's one of the things I help my clients do is to implement profit first, which is simply a cash management system. If you haven't heard of it, but we I wouldn't have even considered having Mike Michalowicz on my stage the first time we did the event.
Mhm.
And it really, what it goes to show is that when you're willing to try something and you're willing to fail, it really shows you where your success can. Like you really get to build on it. And so much of business growth and business maturity comes from being willing to try new things. You and I are going to an in-person thing together in Phoenix. And what I did is that I purposely booked my ticket to be there a day early this time. I never leave extra time. Like I'm very much a family man.
In and out.
My wife doesn't like when I'm out of the house.
Yeah.
So I like to arrive the day of the event, or the day before, at night, and then leave on the red eye, or leave at the very next, the minute the thing is over. Even though I love
Mhm.
networking with everybody that's there, I love spending time with them, I'd rather be home. This time I decided I'm going to add a day before, because there are some people. The first, I have a client in the Arizona area that I really want to meet in person, but there are also, some other business contacts that I've met over the years. It would be nice to catch up on. So I left myself a day. And just yesterday, so we're recording this and we're like a week before this event, and just yesterday I had this sudden epiphany that I have this extra day and it was meant for me to do something, and I really should get my ideal client in the door to do a workshop. So I
Mhm.
called the hotel and I said, "Hey, are there rooms available that I can rent, like to host a little something?" And they at first they wanted to know how many people. So
Of
I
course.
told them, I have no idea how many people. I didn't even open up for registration, right? I'm just like, it's a week before the thing. I could have zero for all I know. And they gave me the pricing, and basically a small room that can hold
Mhm.
15 people, with buying them lunch and with providing coffee and with AV equipment, was going to run me about $1,000.
Well, that's not too bad, is it?
No. And I was
No.
like, this is a no-brainer, because even if I spend $1,000 and I don't get one person to show up, and I have this room all day long and I could sit there and drink all the coffee I want and eat 15 lunches, even if that's, even with that, I've at least learned that I either can't throw this together a week before, or I
Mhm.
don't have people who want to buy a 3-hour workshop, or I need to do a better job promoting it, right? There's a learning opportunity there just by doing it, putting it out
True.
there. So I did it. Like when I signed a contract, gave him my credit card, and I've got this room waiting for me when I get there, that I'm gonna host people in, whether it's my friends that are there to collaborate with me when, in the coaching program I'm in, or whether it's my
Yep.
ideal client that's showing up to get a workshop. Either way, it's going to be a win, because that's how I look at these decisions in business. Is there's no such thing as making a mistake,
Mm.
because every mistake is something you learn from, is something you grow from. I tell my employees when they, and some of them have made some pretty decent sized mistakes, and I tell them, and they think that they're getting fired after that, right? Like, oh my gosh,
Right.
this was huge. And the one thing I tell them is, number one, remember that you're human. I could have made the same mistake that you made.
Mhm.
The one thing I won't tolerate is making the same mistake again, right? You have to
Exactly.
learn from it, and if you've learned
Yeah.
from it, we're all good. Like,
Mhm.
there's a cost to every lesson, and my mother used to say when I was growing up, some kids listen through their ears and some kids listen through their behind. Like, there's different ways that we learn, and some of us learn by
Yeah.
making costly monetary mistakes, and some of us learn by engaging with a coach and spending money to learn from somebody else's mistakes, and learn what
Mm.
not to do. And there isn't a right or wrong way to learn. You probably end up using both, uh, in some way, shape, or form. But it's really, if I have to look back and look at, each step of my growth, and I don't even want to say my success, right? But I mean, there were plenty of years where my growth didn't feel successful.
Mhm.
And I started this in 2014, and then people look at you and they're like, oh wow, you're an overnight success, right? Because all of a sudden they're looking at somebody who's successful, and I still don't feel successful at this stage, right?
Yeah.
But to other people, I'm a massive success. And that's very interesting, that the color of glasses you put on, like this terminology of, look at this through rose colored glasses. um,
Mhm.
it's really the perspective that you put on. Like, if you're looking at it from a place of somebody who hasn't yet achieved what you've achieved, it's, oh my gosh, look what I've done. If you're looking at it from, look at somebody else who's achieved so much more than me, you feel like you've
Yeah.
got nowhere. And you really need to get into the habit of remembering where you were, so you can celebrate where you are today.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the gap and the gain. I don't know if you read that book,
No, I
but
haven't.
it's no, it's same principle basically. So living in the gap is basically just looking at the things that you haven't achieved yet. But if you're living in the gain, then you basically take a look back and take a look at what you have achieved and how far you come. So love
Yeah,
that. And yeah,
I
it's
like to use
it's
reading a book as an example, right? So when you're reading a book, at
mm-hmm,
the beginning, you're looking to see how many pages I have left. Oh my gosh, I have so much of this book left, right? All of a
mm-hmm,
sudden, at some point, there's a turning point, and you start looking at the book. You're like, wow, look how much I've read.
mm-hmm,
And you see how many pages you've gone through. And I think that business is the same way. That, like, at the beginning, it seems like this insurmountable task, and then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, wow, look at everything that I've built. I have, um, 6 full-time employees now. I have an outsourced sales team that does all of our sales calls for us. That was not something I would have even considered or thought about being a possibility.
mm-hmm. Exactly. And what I love about, you're talking about all the mistakes you made and all that stuff. It's interesting because if you think about it, if it had not been for all of these mistakes, you would not be where you are today because those mistakes lead you down a certain path. So kind of being grateful for making all these mistakes that lead you to where you are today. That's powerful.
That's true for business and for life.
Hmm.
Like, I'm on my second marriage. I have, three grown daughters from my first marriage, and then I have 3 little kids. ages 7 to 1
Hmm.
in my second marriage. And yeah, I made mistakes and probably was the cause of the end of my first marriage, but I would have never had three more kids. I would never have my wife now. I would never, like this, a more mature love, a very different, life environment. And it took going through that painful process to get to where I am today, which is, that's my journey. Everybody's on their own
Hmm.
journey. Like, you don't have to get divorced to go on that journey, right?
No.
Don't go divorcing your spouse because you want to have three more kids. Um, but in all reality, it's like, everything that we do has consequence. Some of them good, some of them bad.
Hmm.
And we get to, one of the things that our coach tells us all the time is, you get to put your own meaning on what something means. And, and that's really where what separates the people who are successful from the people who are not, is what
Hmm.
is the meaning you've assigned to this particular thing. And the people who are willing to assign a positive meaning, a meaning that, for example, you I rented this room and nobody buys a seat, and I end up
Hmm.
being out $1,000. I get to sit in that room and look at it, with tears in my eyes because nobody bought a seat, right?
Yeah.
um, One way to look at that is nobody loves me. Nobody wants to buy from me. There's no future in my business, right?
Hmm.
That's a meaning placed on what happened. Another way to look at it is, okay, I I I have to test a lot of different iterations of this, but one thing I know for sure is promoting something a week before I'm doing it, not investigating whether that specific geographic area has my ideal client in it, or my ideal client's there, but an audience that already knows who I am, right? Like, I'm
Hmm.
not going to get a cold person to show up to a workshop unless they're buddies, right?
True.
So how many of my podcast listeners are in the Phoenix area? How many
Hmm.
people who have bought from us in the past are in the Phoenix area? And I didn't do any of that due diligence. I just went on my gut. I made a
Yep.
decision based on my instinct. Like, I have this day. There's a reason for it. Let me get this room and see what I can do with it. See what happens. Um, but now, what the result is, everything has to do with how I define the meaning.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, if nobody shows up, what's the meaning behind that?
Oh,
That you
I
need
mean,
that you need to do better work beforehand.
well, certainly that I need to drink a lot of coffee because I bought like an unlimited amount of coffee for everybody
Yeah.
for the
You
day.
got food for the
You
entire
know,
day, obviously.
15 meals I got to go through. Uh, uh, no, in all reality, I already know that there's a lot of reasons why
Mm.
that room might not get filled.
Yeah.
And it could be my messaging, it could be the amount of time I gave it, it could be the specific geography that I chose. So all that means is that if I'm serious about trying this, as because for me it's not about selling the seats of people coming in. I originally was thinking about doing it for free,
Mm.
and I decided not to for a couple of reasons. We could talk about that if it's helpful. So I'm charging $497 for somebody to join me for this workshop. Um, but originally I was going to do it for free because my intention is after 3 hours of a workshop with me, I'm then going to offer you to join my elite coaching program at $21,000 for the year.
Right.
Um, and for for that, like, if I get one person in the room, there's a potential of getting one client that's paying me.
Mm.
And was that worth spending $1,000 on? So the one thing that was really eye opening to me was how inexpensive it was to rent this. That was
Yeah.
the thing that really boggled my mind. And now it's like I'm thinking, like, I should be doing this every time I need to travel for business. Add a
Hmm.
day, rent a room somewhere, and just put it out there. I'm doing a workshop,
Yeah.
and just see if I start to get traction on these. It's not. I wouldn't travel to a city to do the workshop specifically,
Hmm.
but if I'm going to be there anyway,
Right.
it
You
could
might
cover
as
the
well do
cost
it.
of the trip. It could expose me to more people who are now more engaged with me. There's so many potential possibilities and positive things that can come from it. Um,
Mm.
and really, I wanted to fill the room so badly that I was going to do it for free. The reason I chose to charge is simply because, first of all, there's a cost to it. So, like, why shouldn't, I mean, people understand that they should have to pay for it, but
Mm-hmm.
even without that, if I fill the room with people who got it for free, they may not have been people who were willing to pay for it. And if you're not willing to pay $497 to be for me with me for 3 hours, how am I going to sell you a $21,000 product?
Exactly.
Right. So I put a realistic price tag on it, and we're going to see what happens. And, maybe if after 3 or 4 days of promotion, nobody takes a seat, I cut the price in half, or, something like that. See, play around with the pricing and see if that's what did it, or turn it into a free event, change it from a workshop to a networking event,
Mm-hmm.
and just get to know a bunch of people. So I don't know. I mean, there's so many possibilities of what you do with it. Really, the moral of the whole story is that there's so much you can do when you think outside the box,
Mm-hmm.
and all you need to do is run with your ideas, like just execute on it. So
Yeah.
many of our ideas are like fleeting thoughts, and I'm not saying that every idea you have has merit and every idea is something you should act on. But if you have one that you really feel is going to do something for you, you'll never know if you don't do it. And we're so afraid of not succeeding, of getting the wrong message from it,
Mm-hmm.
that we don't even do it. And then all we do is solidify that exactly the message we're trying to avoid. Right? Like, if I didn't do it,
Absolutely.
I would forever be wondering, are there people in Phoenix who want me for 3 hours? You know, I would never know.
Yeah. And it's easy to, do that. What if it doesn't work out? And like you say, if you don't fill up this room and all that stuff, and it's all negative, and that's what you kind of attracting. But if you flip that on its head and start thinking, okay, what if I do fill this room up? What if I do sell 3 coaching packages, or for your elite program? I mean, would it be worth it? Obviously, yeah, it would be.
Yeah, of
you
course.
know, so there's that is a possibility as well. But just being able to see what the possibilities are and what you can learn from this is super powerful, just like you said. So
Yeah,
it's gonna
and
be
and
exciting.
and even the break even is like, I only need 2 seats, right?
Yeah,
I need 2 people at 497, and I practically have broken even on the event.
yeah,
So, like, and they can each have 7 lunches each.
exactly,
They
exactly.
could take home a week's worth of food.
Yeah. But you mentioned earlier that there was this leap from struggling so hard in your business to suddenly in a year you can have that sudden success. Is that something you've seen a lot in online space, or is that just in the brick and mortar kind of space, or maybe both? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And what's interesting is, in the online space, it can be drastic. Like,
Mm.
you can go, and the truth is that I had an attorney client who went from 83,000 of revenue in 1 year to over 1 million in the next year. So that's that same
Wow.
meteoric rise.
Hmm.
Um, but she had such a unique offering. Like, she honed in on something that was so unique that nobody was doing, and apparently it was a raging problem. Um, so she helped people with something called rage porn. So
Hmm.
if two people are in a consensual relationship, and then they take video of sexual activity, and then they break up, sometimes somebody who really is angry at the other person will take that video and put it up online for people
Right.
wherever. That's called rage porn. So
Uh-huh.
she developed a whole business of, basically, like, give us $10,000 and we'll issue takedown notices to all the different providers, and we'll get that stuff
Hmm.
off the web. And you know and that business just, I mean, overnight, it just took off for her.
Well, I have no
um,
doubts that there's a lot of that happening around the world.
yeah. Um, but so to answer your question, it can happen in any industry, because if you hit the right offer and you hit the right,
Hmm.
like, and the need is there. You could have people lining up at the door to give you their money. But there has to be, like, a scalable system and process behind it.
Hmm.
So she also had a very a very, very scalable model because a lot of the work that was doing didn't require her as an attorney to be doing it. So she was able to
Right.
ramp up staff quickly, train them on what needed to be done,
Mm-hmm.
and roll with the punches. Um, in the online space, the only thing you need to add as more people come in the typical selling a course, selling a membership, is customer service. Like there's
Yeah.
more people to answer their questions when they have a problem, there's a billing issue, things like that. There are places like the coaching program we're in where he adds more coaches if there's more people. Like he wants to have a
Mm-hmm.
certain ratio of coach to person in the group. But the typical course that you're selling, you're not selling coaching with it. You're not selling supports with it in that way. Maybe there's something that you provide on social media. So maybe you need a social media manager. But it's not something that requires scale on your business side in order to support all of
Mm-hmm.
this influx of sales. So what's interesting is when you compare the online industry to any service-based business, brick and mortar, products-based business, all of those things, the inventory is something that requires more effort, energy, or money. And when you're selling knowledge-based products, there is no additional cost for additional inventory sold. So essentially, what you've done is you've taken um, the manufacturing process out of a product, right? Like I sell
Mm-hmm.
sunglasses, but every time I need sunglasses, they appear. Like I don't have to buy
Yeah.
them, right? And that's what happens when you're selling those kinds of digital products is,
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah, I just make more of them. I just issue another license. Um and there are some other things that work like that, like royalties for books
Mm-hmm.
or patent royalties, right? Like you make the effort once, you put out a work, and now people continue to pay you to access that work. So it's not like that's a new model that didn't exist before. um, but most people who think of business and start a business they're not doing that. And when you're not doing that, the growth is slower. But here's the
Mm-hmm.
key, and the key is that I could take two attorneys, and one of them can get their firm from 0 to $1 million in 12 months, and the other one can take 20 years and finally arrive at $1 million annual. And they can offer the exact same service offering. They can
Mm-hmm.
offer the exact same level of support, and that's what happens. And that the difference between those two is simply the first one who did it in 20 years, or the second one who did it in 20 years, they simply went out and did the work and
Mm-hmm.
hoped for the best, waited for the word of mouth to grow, and eventually this person knows about me, this person knows about me, this person knows about me. Now I start getting referrals every once in a while from those people, and that network grows over time, slowly but surely. And eventually I start to have my phone ringing off the hook, which takes years.
Mm-hmm.
The other one recognizes that if I want to have $1 million in revenue, there's no way I'm doing that myself. I need to hire another attorney. I need to hire a marketing agency to get to get cases in the door. I need to hire
Mm-hmm.
somebody to do sales. They call it intake to do sales. I need to, and if I build out this team of a salesperson, a paralegal, a legal secretary, an attorney, and I take these 5 people that I've mapped out that I need, they're going to cost me, I don't know, like 300,000, right? Or 350. But I can make $1 million off it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I put on that hat and I think about what it took to run $1 million business, I now know what I need to do. I'm willing to invest $4,000 a month in marketing because I understand that that's only 5% of my $100,000, and
Exactly.
that's a perfectly normal and acceptable amount to spend on marketing for $1 million business.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the other attorney, when he looks at what are my options for marketing, I can get myself a website for $100, or I could hire a marketing agency for $4,000. I don't even have a dollar coming in. I'm not going to spend $4,000 on a marketing agency, and that's where they operate from. And they wait
Yep.
until they're successful enough to be able to make that investment, which never happens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really being willing to take the risks and make the investments before you're ready for them,
Yep.
because you understand the vision that they can create. You understand the future version of your business that they can create. The online business is no different.
No,
It's just
it's
in different
same thing.
ways. Instead of
Mm-hmm.
spending your money with a marketing agency, instead of spending your money with hiring an attorney, you might hire yourself an integrator. You might spend a ton of money on Facebook ads, because you understand that that should be turning into dollars for you. Now,
Mm-hmm.
one of the huge mistakes that online businesses make is they think, first of all, everyone tries to do everything themselves. So, like, you try to become a Facebook ads expert, which is the dumbest thing in the world if you think about it. Like, you're going to spend $50,000 this year on Facebook ads, and you're not willing to spend another 10 to have somebody do it for you effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, you're going to try to make believe that you know as much as the marketing person who's been doing this their entire career next door, and you're going to achieve the same results. So there's a lot of there's a lot of things that happen in the online industry that, like, all these different people are teaching you. Here's how to do this. Here's how to do this. And we spend so much time in the first couple of years of my business. I bought over $45,000 worth of courses because I was learning how to do everything.
Yep.
And all it took was one BBD Live, one person saying one thing that made me realize it's all about who's doing it, not how. And that was when I hired my first VA, and I haven't stopped building my team since. And it's very simply this: it's the more things that I can get someone else to do, the more likely it's done well, the more likely
Mm-hmm.
it's scalable and can handle the increased capacity I need. And the more that I try to figure out how to do things myself, the less sleep I'm getting, the less time I'm spending with my family, and the crappier my stuff is, because I'm not going to be the expert at everything.
Yep.
And I might be eventually after 20 years, but I'll be that attorney who took 20 years to become, $1 million revenue stream, right? That's like the slowest way that you can grow. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I do think that people are, as business owners, you need to be willing to invest capital. You need to invest in the right places. You have to make some good decisions, but you shouldn't be trying to learn how to do these things. You should be finding somebody who's very good at it, has been successful in the past, and let them do it for you. Even when I decided to run our first virtual event, first I bought a course on how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I met somebody in the Facebook group of that course who does it for people. And then I made the very, very difficult decision to invest with him $15,000 to have him coordinate the entire production of the event.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the best money I ever spent.
Yeah.
We ended
But at
up
the same time, if you hadn't bought that course, you might not gotten to that point where you actually invested in someone else.
that this is true. But had I started from there looking for somebody to do it, I probably would have found somebody, and they would have had the knowledge. They would have known what needed to be done. I'm not I'm not bad mouthing buying courses. I love taking courses. I
No,
love
no.
learning them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between learning because you want to know more and you want to have the knowledge to ask the right questions versus
Mm-hmm.
learning and then thinking you need to execute on everything yourself. And I
And
and
something
and
about
that's a
just
big
learning the
difference.
basics too. I mean, if you're running Facebook ads, you need to know, what are you looking at? What's when is the Facebook ads performing good or bad? You need to know that stuff as well. Otherwise, it's no help.
Yes and no. You know what I mean? Like I agree with you to an extent, but then I ask you, like, do you think that the CEO of pick an American company that an American publicly traded company that you know really well, any company, name one.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I have no idea.
Pick one. Tesla.
Sure.
You know Tesla? You heard of them?
Yeah.
They make cars with batteries, right? Do you think that the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, knows what the Facebook ads manager looks like?
Probably not.
Probably not. But
Or
do
we
you
could, let's
think that
say
he's
he does it.
signing off on a multi-billion-dollar ads budget?
Absolutely.
Is he doing it blindly?
I wouldn't say yes that he does that, because there's probably people already double checking something, or yeah. I mean, there's people who have already proved this that he trusts, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's possible that he's just trusting somebody and not even looking at it. That's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
But more than likely, he's being presented with a very high level view set of numbers to understand where that money is going, what it's converting at, and what it's turning into in revenue dollars.
Yeah. I mean,
And
the return on the investment, that's basically what he's looking at. Okay, am I making
right,
money
right,
back
but
on this? Fine. Let's.
so he has somebody who prepares that and presents it to him, right?
Mhm.
That's probably his CMO, his chief marketing, right? But if you go and engage somebody to run Facebook ads for you, you should expect and make sure it's clear that they plan to do this, that they're going to give you a high level overview of how your ads are performing. And
Mhm.
they should be educating you on what the numbers mean, and whether this is good or bad, or and how the tweaks should happen. Is it better to know more? It's always better to know more, but think about it this way. Like, if you know a little bit of medical knowledge, does that make you a better patient or a worse patient for your doctor when you're there, right?
It's
Like
gonna be worse.
like
You
so,
don't want to go to
sometimes
Google and see
right,
what the symptoms are.
sometimes knowing a little bit actually makes you more dangerous
Yeah.
than being an expert. So there's a fine line between I want to educate myself and I want to know more,
Hmm.
and I don't want to know enough that I end up sticking my nose where it doesn't belong, kind of thing, right? Like,
True.
um, our most successful experiences with outsourced ads managers is when we basically shared our vision, shared our numbers, our goals with them, and just let them run with it.
Hmm.
And when I start micromanaging the process and saying, "Hey, I noticed that you turned on this ad and this ad, and I don't understand why you have this audience. I think this is a mistake." Those don't do so well.
Hmm.
Not because my input is not valuable, but because it makes them think that you don't trust them. So they're automatically not going to try to do their best to make your thing like you've given them the hat to hang on, like,
Hmm.
oh, this wasn't successful because you stuck your nose in and gave me your input, right? Like, had you just let me run with it, you'd be just as successful as all the other clients, right? So there's that. It's a give and take, and um, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for all these different courses. I think that there is, but I think that somebody who's teaching people how to run ads should be like the people who are buying that should be people who want to run ads as a profession for other people,
Hmm.
right? Like, there's a very basic introductory level that you need to know to understand how Facebook tracks it and how the metrics are measured and what they
Hmm.
mean. That doesn't require you to have to understand how to pick which objective are we picking, and is it, are we paying for the entire budget of the thing, or are we doing it per ad set, and like, all of those decisions are things you don't need to be involved in, and somebody else can figure that out and do it better than you.
Hmm.
And if you're going to be busy tinkering with your ads, what are you not doing? Like all that time you're spending with it, what could you have been doing that would have been more productive?
Hmm.
It's this old thing, like what's your hourly rate? And once again, our coach goes into this with us at our various, every once in a while he goes into this discussion. Like, if you take the total revenue of your business for a year and divide it by 2,000 hours, which is the typical amount of time, that's maybe you're spending less time, maybe you're only 1,000 hours a year, or maybe you're spending more time, you're 4,000 hours. But if you take where you're at now and divide all of that time in there, you'll get an hourly rate. And if you take where you want to be and divide it by that time, you'll get where your hourly rate should be. So maybe you're earning 100,000 in 2,000 hours, and your hourly rate is $50, right? Or maybe you're earning a million in 2,000 hours, or let's say 1,000 hours, right? And now your rate's $1,000.
Hmm.
So now every time that you do something, you have to ask yourself, is this something that somebody who's getting paid $1,000 an hour would do? And the moment that you can pay somebody less to do it, now maybe not if you're paying them 900 an hour, maybe you would decide to keep that yourself, right? But if it's 50, $100 an hour, you would hand
Hmm.
that off. My time is worth 900. But the only way you get to a million is because you freed up all your time to be able to focus on to focus on the big level things that are going to move the needle to drive that revenue, not the little day-to-day things that so many people do their own graphics on Canva, right? Like I I have a VA who I hired in 2017, and she was uncomfortable doing graphics when I first asked her, "Hey, can you do this?"
Hmm.
She learned. She learned over time. She's really, really good at it now. Well, she does all of our graphics. I've been in Canva a few times when, my wife needed something for the kids or whatever, and I just, it was the wrong times. I couldn't send it to my Filipino VA, right? But the reality is it, I would be wasting so much valuable time if I was futzing around with Photoshop or Canva or any of these programs, because it's just not my area of expertise.
Exactly.
If it lit
Yep.
me up and excited me or whatever and I wanted to be busy with it, that's fine. But most things that business owners hold on to are not things they enjoy. Like I run an accounting firm, right? You should be outsourcing your bookkeeping. There's very few business owners that actually should be doing their own books.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are the nerds, right? Like you geek out on
Hmm.
numbers. You feel like you need to be in there just because that's your de-stressor at the end of the day. Great. Go do your own books. But for the other 98% of you, just hire a freaking bookkeeper and let them do your
Exactly.
books for you. Don't
Yeah.
even mess around in it. I mean, what ends up happening is you don't do it because you don't like to. So at least this way it gets done.
Absolutely. I want to say that we had a really interesting conversation. I think we could probably go on for a couple more hours, but we gotta, try to wrap this up. But um, how can people get in touch with you and work with you if they need your services?
Yeah, so I mean, the best thing is I'm a podcast host. Go listen to my show, Profit with Law. You can find it on any podcast player or also at profitwithlaw.com. And then, as mentioned, I don't know when this is going to air, but our next Law Firm Growth Summit is in December. Um, yeah, at the current minute that it's being recorded, it's a waitlist page, but it's going to open up for registrations within the next week and a half of this recording. So you can go to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com. And if you're curious to see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, I have no problem with you registering and signing up, even if you're not a law firm. You're welcome to come and join us. We have vendors that sponsor the event. The initial tickets that you get are free. So when you register, you get a free ticket, and then we then try to sell you a paid ticket that gives you access to more things. So there's no harm in registering and signing up for that. So
Hmm.
if anybody listening to this is just curious about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and you want to see the process, you certainly are welcome to check it out at Law Firm Growth Summit.
Awesome. We'll make sure we link that up in the show notes so people have something to click on. And thank you once again for the great conversation we had today. And thank you to everybody for listening in today.